Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to continue our look at Quack, the ground level funny animal comic from the 70s. We're up to number 5, and the cover features Michael T. Gilbert's The Wraith. And this illustrates the story within. This is a really fun story, which we'll get to in a second. But this is one of the best read stories ever. So let's get in this. We have an introduction from Mike Friedrich with a nice little illustration from Michael T. Gilbert. And kind of an interesting editorial where Mike Friedrich is basically saying, yeah, I don't really like funny animal comics that much, or at least I don't know much about them. So this comic book has had a hard time finding its voice. So yeah, it's kind of a weird editorial. Okay, here we go. The Reality Wraith by Michael T. Gilbert. So this takes Michael T. Gilbert's kind of formalist play with comics to a new level. So it starts off with, it says, many people live lives of quiet desperation. The writer is one such animal. And look at this. We see a photo of a typewriter, but kind of drawn over, and these cartoon hands. And he kind of does this little poem. Tiny epistle, lone and fragile, let us follow your winding trail through the path of life. Talking about his journey from the sender to the recipient, going through post boxes and postal offices. And this letter is for the Wraith, but it's care of the Mulchberry. Wait, is that the name of the city? Sorry, it's not Mulchberry. That's the inspector's name. So it's called Cyanide City. I don't think they've ever said this before. But now I guess the Wraith, we find out, lives in Cyanide City. So this letter arrives at the police station. Inspector Mulchberry's niece, Ivory, is hanging out, kind of drooling over the good-looking crooks on the wanted posters. Her uncle gets very mad at her, and she gets even angrier back. She's like, bite off my head, why don't you? And then he admits that he's worried about the Wraith. Ever since last episode, when the Wraith, when the woman he loved died, he's been moping around. He hasn't been fighting crime. He's just been sitting in his room for 3 months now. So he's really worried. And I wanted to point this out. I'm sorry, I forgot. When she yells at him, I love this, just how, his change in posture and emotion. It's pretty expressive. He's shocked to realize, and then he basically reveals that he's really sad. So Ivory says, I'm going to go see the Wraith. And I'll deliver this letter to him that arrived for him. So, apparently there's been all these reports of strange creatures popping up in the city. And outside the window, we see this giant dog face. Ivory sees it, but she doesn't trust her eyes. When she looks out the window, it's gone. We see it up on the roof, though. The silhouette of a dog. And then after that, she runs off to deliver the letter to the Wraith. I really like this lettering here. Her knocking on the door. And then look at this inside the Wraith's house. All of a sudden, the shading totally changes. And we're in a total film noir movie because the Wraith is feeling so, sad and in a dark place. So he basically says, go away, Ivory. She's trying to cheer him up. She's trying to give him a pep talk, and he just keeps saying, go away. And he's really like a changed person. So she tells him a story. Because, he's calling her Pollyanna. And she tells the Wraith about her childhood, which is not good. She was in a really shitty school, fell in with the wrong crowd, was a drug addict by the time she was 12. Her home life was shit. And by the time she was 12, she was already burnt out. Not only a drug addict, she had seen most of her friends either planted in the ground or in juvie, and the whole time we get all these great camera shots, once again, very Will Eisner. Like, this is very Will Eisner, looking at them through this window pane. I also had to mention, we see all this, bourbon bottles and detritus on the ground. Like, the Wraith has obviously let himself go. So even after telling him this story, basically saying, listen, I'm not some Pollyanna who's had this great life, but I realized that I, just had to get up on my 2 feet and do something about it. And you got it too. You can't just sit here forever sulking. And he just still says, go away, Ivory. So she opens the letter and reads it to him. Apparently this scientist wants to meet the Wraith for some reason. And let me see his name here. Oh, the scientist, he's a professor. He has information about these strange creatures that have been sighted throughout the city. So the Wraith doesn't want to do anything about it. He doesn't care. So she says, fine, I'm going to go. And he's like, don't do that, Ivory. This guy could be dangerous. She's like, no, I don't care. If you're not going to do anything, I'm going to. And she leaves. And then we have this, repeated panels of the Wraith, grumbling and just being like, stupid girl. Go, still get killed, see if I care. And you can tell he's broody about it. And then he says, God damn it, fine. And he puts on his hat and coat. And then it says, look out, world, the Wraith is back. So he runs into Inspector Mulchberry here. And now they both go off running to this professor's house. Professor Kabibble. Meanwhile, we see all these weird creatures just poking around. Look, a Egyptian hieroglyph. Oh, realistically drawn eagle. And I don't know who this guy is. I like it, though. I wish he had more of a starring role in this comic. And so they make it to the professor's house, and when they walk inside, we see that this creature problem is getting out of hand. And we see various stages of animals, photographs, really well rendered realistic drawings, and everything in between. So he comes inside and they meet Professor Kabibble. And he says, where's Ivory? What have you done with her? He's like, oh, she's right here. And this is Ivory. She's just a very well rendered, realistically drawn. I guess, what is she? A lion cub? I never knew this whole time that Ivory was supposed to be a cat. I didn't know what she was supposed to be. I thought she was supposed to be another dog. But it's very cute. And also very well drawn. And of course the Wraith is like, you fiend. And Professor Kabibble pulls out his reality ray. And he blasts the Wraith with it. And this is the part that cracks me up. So here's the Wraith, right? And then he's like really well drawn, like a dog, like a real dog. But still, he's got his arms and like kind of cartoony hands. And then, still even better drawn and even looking more like a real dog. And then eventually, he actually has a photo of a dog wearing this clothing. This poor dog, this dog was like probably like, fuck you, this sucks. But it's just so weird. I just love this whole idea. It's such a fun concept, And, he's basically telling the Wraith about all of his theories. He basically says, I theorize there's a third dimension. There's a three-dimensional reality somewhere. Talking about our world, I guess. And look at this. He does this great 3D looking thing to kind of demonstrate it. And the Wraith is just sitting there like a dumb dog. I like the body language here. He's in his reverie. And he's just zapping that reality ray around. So the whole time Kabibble was waiting outside, the Wraith said if I don't come out in 40 minutes or half an hour, get your cops and come in. So that's exactly what happens. They barge in, and the whole time there's this running gag about how Professor Kabibble keeps pronouncing his name wrong. He keeps saying the Wrath. And the Wraith is always correcting him and saying, I really don't like being called the Wrath. So even though he's a dumb dog, I guess it breaks through this. He calls him the Wrath again. He says, not Wrath, Wraith. And he jumps on Kabibble. The ray slips to the ground, and its polarity is reversed. And there's kind of the big explosion. And whenever everyone gets up, Ivory is back to normal, so is the Wraith. And then they look with a gasp. They say, where's Kabibble? Oh my God, look. I love this last page so much. So even within this, even though obviously we're looking at a two-dimensional page, but he's like even really two-dimensional because in the artifice of the art, they're obviously three-dimensional. We're seeing it from this high-end angle, and he's just this flat, poorly drawn, as if a child drew it. It's like that Jackie's Diary guy drew this page. I love that ending. This whole comic is delightful. It's just so fucking clever, and I just showed Michael T. Gilbert, man. It's so weird though. Like his best stuff is his early stuff. I like Mr. Monster a lot. I think it's fun, but Mr. Monster isn't nearly as smart as this stuff. And then after Mr. Monster, he hasn't done much, but every now and then I see a comic by him. It's sad. His chops are gone. He uses the computer too much. He just looks like crap, and they're just dumb gags. So it's amazing, these Wraith stories, just how they have so much going for him. And I wish he kept going in this vein. Next, someone who never had anything going for him. This is Dot Butcher's Tales of the Oregon Bobcat, At Last, Long Love. And I don't really want to talk about this guy's... This comic's really starting to irk me. It's like a little slightly more adult version of Garfield or something. And in this one, the Oregon Bobcat is in heat, basically. And wanting to sow her oats. And her owners sense this and actually introduce this male cat, this very poorly drawn male cat, into the household, almost like a stud cat. And he doesn't like her. He's very resistant to her charms. He gets better drawn as the comic goes along. Those first few panels look really terrible. And there's another bad one. It doesn't look like a cat to me. And One night, a robber comes into the house, and the Oregon bobcat mauls him. And this impresses the male cat, and now he's all like, hey, would you like to share some catnip? So seeing her maul this robber, I guess, changed his opinion of her. And this just, I like it more than Barefoots by Helen Cruz, but that's not saying much. Barely. It's on that level where both of those comics just irk me. And when they're in an anthology, it bothers me. And I almost want to rip the pages out. I just don't even want to look at it. Okay, maybe I'm just cranky right now. But I don't like these comics. Speaking of the opposite, I do like these comics. Dave Sims the Beavers. So we get 2 more episodes here. And once again, Red, that's the name of one of the beavers, and White are having a little debate about what would a Canadian superhero be. White is reading this comic called Captain Canaduck, which might be making fun of Captain Canuck, which I think started at this point, which was a Canadian superhero published in Canada by Richard Cumley, who would later go on to have beautiful, the early art of George Freeman. That's how he kind of came to a little fame. And Red is basically arguing that the only real Canadian superhero would be like a loser, basically. Canadians are not born to be winners. And they're talking about, they're obviously making fun of like the Marvel superheroes, where, you know, they're like Spider-Man. He's always whining about his fate and worried about his aunt. And just kind of, you know, not a happy camper, Peter Parker in those days. And so they're kind of making fun of that, showing this Captain Canaduck being that kind of neurotic superhero. Red brings up the point, he says, you know, he's not a survivor, he's a whiner. He's a compulsive whiner. Canadians are survivors. Even though they have no control over their destiny or their fate, they persevere until they overcome. So White keeps bringing up examples. What if there's an ordinary duck and he's turned into the bulky duck, like the Incredible Hulk? I like that name, the bulky duck. It kind of rolls off the tongue. And of course, Red is like, you're not getting it. You're missing the point. A Canadian hero must be ordinary in every way. He never gets ahead, never has any success, but he survives, prevails against overwhelming odds. A survivor. And so Red says, I can see it now. The Canadian superhero. Picture this. And we see a cover of his fantasy. A hero for our time, the victim. Totally aping the Marvel comics dressing, house dress at the time. Wait, is it house dress? I can't remember what that's called. Trade dress? And he says that would be a truly Canadian superhero. It was this horrible, nebbish, leave me alone, please. And the little kid is saying, I'd hate to see a truly Canadian barbarian. I would love to actually see. Hey, I guess we do get to see that in Cerebus, which is about to start. In the second story, it's kind of a continuation of the first. And White is in his room typing away, and he says, I've done it. I've come up with the ideal Canadian comic hero. And it's him, a white beaver, figure of mystery. So it looks like he's turned himself into this almost Doctor Strange-like character fighting these demons. Once again, the really nice Chuck Jones-like ducks appear. And he's describing the story to Red. And it's very much like bad fan fiction. Doctor Strange fan fiction. Dude, some stuff is so simple. But it's just, I like this. This cartooning, it really is, it's just perfect for like these gags, you know, for telling this kind of Canadian humor. And then Red basically tears into it and starts criticizing it. He says there's no characterization, no plot. You've got to have characters with depth of feeling. And so White runs off, realizing, okay, since it won't make a good comic book, I'll turn it into a pilot film for TV or a Broadway play or a film. He just doesn't get it. Because Red basically tells him, this is it's not right for a comic book. But what he really means is the whole story is stupid. Here we have the lovely work of Ken Macklin again. And the story's not so great. But guys, I just love Ken Macklin's work. Look at this panel. This is just gorgeous stuff. If you don't like funny animals, it's probably annoying that all the characters look like this. This is one of my least favorite characters he's ever drawn. I don't like this guy who's half aardvark, half platypus. His name's Kerwin Keystone, and I guess he's investigating this planet. And they plop him down on this planet. They zap him down there, the teleporter. The art is so good, though. I'm sorry, this panel, I just can't get over it. It's like, this is beautiful. All the stuff. So when Kerwin gets to the planet, it's called Procyon 4. It's a war-torn planet. And these two guys show up. And they don't know what to make of him. They're like, you think he's an enemy? You think it's a trick of the enemy? And Kerwin is basically, can barely think. He's just landed on the planet. They ask him if he's a duck. And he says, no, actually, my dad's a platypus. That's why I got this kind of beak. And there's an enemy attack. And so it turns out in this future, there's no ducks. Supposedly there's no ducks left in the universe. They're acting like ducks are this horrible menace. So almost every planet has either banned ducks or outlawed them or killed them off. But now he's on the planet of the ducks. And he sees a duck. The duck denies that he's a duck, though. You'd think he'd be better at drawing ducks since he's a funny animal artist, Ken Macklin. But apparently all he knows how to draw is these like dog people. And he tells them the whole story about this planet. How it once again is a commentary, if you can believe it, just how popular funny animal ducks were in the 70s. So he's basically spinning this story about how ducks became so popular that no medium was immune. All art, music, and literature was absorbed in a duck mania. And so the non-duck populace degenerated into a warlike rabble. Look at this amazing, the way he draws these rocks here. And this tree. He's such a good artist, like a straight artist. I wonder if he ever drew like a non-funny animal comic. I have a feeling it would be great. So he says back in the 1990s, all ducks that were left on Earth were put into rocket ships and sent into space. And I guess the same thing happened on Earth. And he asks the duck, he says, where are the ducks now? And he says, alas, driven to extinction. And then right then, the teleporter beam wears off, just like Adam Strange. And he's kind of sucked back to the ship. And the duck says, you can all come out now. And we see the ducks. They're not extinct. They just hide because everyone hates them. Can we help it if we're popular? There's so many Quack stories that talk about this. Kind of have this anti-duck mania going on. Speaking of which, this is interesting, guys. This is art and story by Gene Day, the late lamented Gene Day. Guy died really young. He was so talented, but this is him doing a funny animal comic, and I don't think it's his forte. This isn't. It's okay, but Gene Day should stick to the serious art because he was so good at it. But once again, we see this city, and we see this very Howard the Duck looking guy running through the alleys. And then we see these other anthropomorphic animals basically cornering him and saying, now it's time for you to get yours. For years, you damn ducks have been getting all the glory. That new mag being called Quack was the last straw. And once they just keep reiterating, everybody wants ducks now. Ducks, ducks, ducks. And they figure if they kill him, there'll be no more Quack. And he even says Friedrich will have to get a new mascot and title. So I guess this really is supposed to be Howard the Duck. Because they're basically blaming it all on Howard the Duck, which is kind of true. Howard the Duck came out and it was a phenomena. They mention these other ducks. First him, then Donnie, Cousin Scrooge, Daphne Duck, and all the rest. And we see them, just nice sound effects here. Them working him over. And so then they head over to Quack to give Friedrich the big news. And they open the door. And they go, what? And the look on their face is just like, oh shit. Actually, sorry, we got the wrong office. We were looking for Rusty Key Comics, Gold Key Comics. And then we see that Mike Friedrich is this duck. So, of course, that's why they left in a hurry. And I guess they never knew he was a duck. And he's on the phone with Frank Brenner, apparently, trying to get a new duck story out of him. So that's just a very insular little private joke comic. It's kind of nice, but it's just weird seeing Gene Day do funny animals. And then we get one page of Newton, which is it's basically just like a little note from Steve Leialoha, except that has this gorgeous illustration. Look how good Steve Leialoha is. This is beautiful. And it's basically Newton just saying, hey, folks, we've had a lot of fun adventures in the past few months, but we couldn't wrangle up a story for this issue. But we'll be back next issue. And I hope that's true. Here's another really dopey ad with Mike Friedrich for Star Reach Productions. And we have a Ken Macklin back cover. Kind of lackluster. I think mainly because it focuses on this guy. I think that's like the worst design character Ken Macklin ever did. But there's some nice painted effects here. Is that magic marker, actually? This looks pretty groovy. Just the stonework. Ken Macklin's really good, his color. So that's why I'm a little disappointed that he got this full color back cover. And it's just not up to snuff for him. Then again, it's 1977, so Maybe he wasn't as good then. So there you go, guys. Quack number 5. A pretty decent issue, but made more than decent by this Wraith story. Once again, Michael T. Gilbert, just the star of this comic, I think, by far. And I guess we have one more issue left. Next time we talk about Quack, it'll be the last issue, number 6. So I'll be sad to see these go. These are really fun to look through, Oregon Bobcat or not. I really have a nostalgic love of these comics, and some of the first non-mainstream comics I ever bought as a child. Hope you guys like looking at them, and I hope you guys like looking at this one. And I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix. Sorry, I couldn't remember if I was a foundation or an academy. Okay, hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.